killing bush. I've got him at gunpoint.
They're pulling them out.
911. Advise ready for camp.
Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom.
And I'm Chuck. Trying something out.
Right? Just going for it, right?
Yeah.
There's no warning. Just boom. A lot more vibrant,
just-
a lot more happy, a lot more upbeat.
A lot more
You're trying
happy.
to counteract the anger and irritation you feel over your back problems.
Yeah, I had a doctor's appointment yesterday for that too. Pain management.
Oh,
They tried giving me so many drugs, and I was like, "What are the side effects?" Oh,
weight
I don't
gain,
know.
loss of
Like,
sex
you
drive.
can Google it. You can Google it. I can't do her accent right, but anyways, she's this tiny
Wait,
little lady.
she didn't know the side effects?
She looked it up on her phone, dude. She Googled it.
Oh my God.
And the first one was drowsy. And I was like, can I drink on it? Can I drink alcohol on it? She's like, I don't recommend it. I was like, next. I was like, I don't want to be a fucking zombie. All right.
Right.
Next
right.
one. Same thing. And I was like, this is another anti-seizure medication. And no, guys, I don't have seizures, but it's nerve pain medication to stop pain. Okay. Yada, yada. There we go.
Right.
And I was like, side effects. And she's like, oh, similar. And I was like, oh, what's similar? She goes, it's gonna make you drowsy. And I was like, I don't want to be a fucking zombie. And I was like, can I drink alcohol with it? She's like, I don't recommend it. And I was like, I'm not taking it. And she goes, the next one, she goes, and this one is an antidepressant. And I was like, what?
Cymbalta?
Antidepressant? She's like, it can help. Cymbalta. She's
Yeah,
like, it can help with pain.
there's antidepressants that help with pain, supposedly, but
Not
dude,
taking
they're
it. I told her
like,
I was,
no. Yeah, they're weak.
suicidal thoughts, ideation.
Yeah,
like,
dude.
I'm good. Depression, severe depression, and
Just-
it can make me sleepy.
Yep.
And then I was like, no, I'm good. I'll deal with my depression like a man. I'll shove it deep down inside of me and forget about it. And she looked at me and she goes, it's not for depression. I said, that's what I do though. And she looked at me. She's like, you're a fucking psycho. And I was like, I'm in pain. Like I was in pain in there. They're shooting pain down my leg. So they're
Yeah.
ordering a new MRI because they're like, fuck. Even my spine doctor's like, you're still having pain? I'm like, yeah. He's like, let's get together in 2 weeks and let me know how you feel. And I'm
Yeah.
like, hey man, I'm still having fucking pain. He's like, Dill?
Let's get
I was
together
like,
in 3
yeah, man.
weeks.
He goes, all right, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And I'm like, man, it's that way every single time. And now
Oh,
I'm getting a new
God.
MRI. And I'm like, this is fucked, dude. I was like, just tell me I'm fucking broken, that I need the fusion, but you guys don't want to do the fusion because of my age and you want to wait a little bit longer. I fucking
Mhm.
get it. But let's not sugarcoat horse shit
Yeah.
and call it a cookie. Let's just call it horse shit and say, hey, this is what it is, and this is what's
Say,
gonna happen.
here's some horse
And I
shit,
can
and you
deal
still
with
got to
that
take a
better.
bite. Yeah.
Right. I can deal with that better. Like, hey, you're fucked up. You're going to be fucked up. You're going to be living with pain for quite some time, maybe forever. And we're going to have to learn to deal with it. And then in a few years, we'll get that surgery done when it's unbearable, when you're a little bit older. And then maybe
Yeah.
that helps. But I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I can't wait for this medical pension to be over. I'm getting a fucking second opinion from a new doctor. I'm going to try to get a knee replacement and I'm going to try to get my back done and fucking just not try to fuck it up. Right. Nothing physical, nothing crazy.
Nope.
And I'm just, dude, I'm going fucking stir crazy in my house. I don't like, and there's other people who, and I think we've talked about it before. We were going to talk about it on the show regarding those who are struggling and going through medical retirements, who have went through
Yeah.
medical retirements, or who are disabled, who are going through disability pension bullshit or workers' comp. Look, I get it. It sucks. I'm fucking dealing with it. I'm going crazy. I feel like a piece of shit. I'm not going to lie. I feel like a sack of shit.
Yep.
Just sucking up my department's funds. And it makes me feel like shit, but I'm like, there's no way I can go and push a black and white right now. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, fuck me. I get in my truck and I'm like shooting pains down my knee and my fucking leg from my back. And I'm like, and it's all my left side.
Oh God! Imagine
like,
putting
dude.
on a belt and walking around.
Yeah, I tried thinking about that. I was
Mhm.
like, fuck that, dude.
Yeah.
I picked up so my oldest daughter, not my oldest, my second oldest, my oldest here right now, because the kids with their
Mhm.
other mom. And she's 2, but she's very petite. So she's only like, I don't know, 20 pounds, something like that. And look,
Mhm.
I can't be lifting more than 20 pounds, right? And I don't lift
Right.
more than 20 pounds. It fucking hurts. But when your daughter like leans on you and then fucking tries to wrap her legs around you, what are you supposed to do? Push her off? Like,
Dude,
4
when they
feet in the air
ambush you
from a
and jump
chair?
on your back.
Oh, so she was on the table and she was standing up on the chair, and I went over there and grabbed her because she was gonna fucking eat shit. And then she kind of like put all her weight on me, and I was like, "Oh, let me put you onto the ground." And I
Yeah.
felt it on my back, and I was like, "Dude, this is fucked. Like, it hurts to hold my kid, even holding my 7-pound 4-month-old is painful." And I'm a guy who can used to lift a lot of fucking weight, and I'm going fucking crazy. Depression through the roof. Not gonna lie, it's through the roof because I'm not able to do shit. I'm
Yeah.
fucking just sitting there. It's painful. Like, I'm like,
Yeah, it's depressing.
Let's drink.
It's fucking depressing.
Try not to drink here.
Well, I appreciate it that you're
Happy
trying not to
thoughts.
drink like all the time. You can drink some of the time, though. Come on. There you go. Attaboy. So we have a returning guest, but it's kind of a weird sideways returning guest, don't we?
Yeah. So we have Dakota. And I hope we can say your name because we just did. And if not, oh well, we're live. I'm just kidding. We're not live. So if you need to take it out, we'll take it out. But Dakota here, he's volunteer firefighter, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I spoke with him over the phone. He's rocking one of our shirts right now, the Ride the Lightning shirt. Super
Yeah.
awesome. How do you like that real quick?
It fits great. I love this shirt.
Awesome.
Yep.
And we spoke over the phone, and I apologized to him over some stuff. And I was like, "Hey man," and he's like, "Hey dude, like I've been reaching out to you." And I'm like, yes, you have. I completely forgot. I'm not gonna lie. I apologize to him. He got some cool goodies in his bag.
Yeah. You've had some shit
that I
going on.
sent. And yeah,
Dakota was
and we got him
on
on.
Locker Room previously.
Yeah.
And he joined us there to talk about some stuff. And now, after some back and forth, as you can hear from Chuck having some scheduling issues, Dakota's back to talk about some of his firefighter stories. Man, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys? Well,
Good.
besides Chuck's back.
My knee.
Yeah,
Was the old expression? If I were any better, I'd be twins.
right.
Yeah,
Dude.
we tell ourselves that. So why don't you? So you're a firefighter, and
Side note, real quick. Hold on. Let me
Yeah,
interject.
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I see why people get hooked on opiates.
Mm.
Continue.
Yeah. I mean, they
This
do.
pain sucks. No,
Yeah.
because of this type of pain.
Yeah.
Pain. Anyways, continue.
Okay.
It was just in my head.
That's all. So now, how long have you been a firefighter?
So I was a firefighter. I joined when I was 16. Basically, kind of the story on that is my little brother, one of his best friend's house burnt to the ground. I come from a very small town in Missouri, like 264 people in the town completely.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was, I seen the fire department. It was in very poor shape. And I just kind of decided, I was like, I can make a difference. I can help. And I wanted to learn. So I joined the fire department that day. And total, I ended up spending 10 years. Then I moved to Indiana for a job. So I had to leave the department. But yeah, in total, I was 10 years, kind of started out in the junior fire department side of it.
Mhm. Is that like a junior fire? Is that like explorers,
Okay,
like cadets, like, or do you actually like, because explorers,
run
they do stuff, but they don't run calls. They may go
Right.
on a ride along or something like that.
So obviously, because our department was very small, when I joined our department, I think there was only 4 or 5 people on it.
Oh,
Oh,
fuck
shit.
yeah, you're running calls.
Oh yeah, no, I straight up.
Child
so
labor.
that day I started rolling hose. That was my first crash course, was rolling hose. And within a week I had a radio and I was running calls. And I mean, obviously they were, I wasn't allowed to go inside the house. I wasn't, and go inside burning buildings or stuff like that. But I was outside rolling hose, pulling hose, doing that kind of thing. Medical.
Oh, the grunt work.
Yeah. Oh, all the grunt work. And I mean,
Perfect. That's great.
The
car
rookies,
accidents.
the guys that were low on the totem pole with no seniority were like, yes,
Exactly.
bring on the free labor.
God.
Exactly. And I mean, ran medical calls, kind of like any typical fire department, the way they are set up nowadays, they run way more or medical calls than they do,
Yeah.
actual fires. And ours was no different. And I mean, you think that in a small town, we don't see much. There was a lot of grass fires because we were a very rural community.
I was gonna say, like Missouri out there, because my partner lives in Trenton. He
Okay.
Used to he lives in, I don't know what, but he decided to super commute and move to from fucking California. He's still employed by our agency, but he moved to Trenton, Missouri.
Okay.
And he shows me photos and videos all the time, and it's flat as shit.
Oh yeah. So the town I'm from is about 60 miles south of Kansas City. It literally bordered right on the Kansas state line. I mean, that's kind of where I was at. Um, but I mean, grass fires, tons of grass fires in the summer. Lots of
Tornadoes?
medical cars, car accidents, and I mean, being out there in ag country, tractors catching on fire, combines catching on fire, all that kind of stuff. Car accidents. We had a major railroad that ran through the center of our town because there was a power plant, a coal power plant, just on the other side of the state line, so they would come through us.
Mm.
It's been said on this show before. I've seen person versus train.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The train always wins. The train
Yeah,
has
yeah.
never lost that battle. That was
Mhm.
a fun 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
going
you may
and
have
doing
you
that.
have you may
Oh,
have
fuck.
gotten missed, right?
Yeah.
It may have gotten nicked, like your car bumper gets torn off. But if a train tears your car bumper, like even if it just kisses your car bumper, it's still going to spin the shit out of your car and
Oh, yeah.
destroy. like you
Total
might
it.
get lucky if the train nicks your bumper and you survive, right?
And if
But
So
and if a,
I
I was
was
gonna say
go
if a
ahead.
train kisses your body
oh no,
and
there
you
is no
don't
such thing.
explode,
Yeah.
it will incinerate and obliterate every fucking bone inside of you and leave you as a meat and jello sack.
So
Yep.
what happened is this was kind of one of the local drug addicts because small town drugs and how that game is played.
Mhm.
He took off walking down the train tracks and was drunk and high on opiates and decided to lay down and take a nap.
Oh, nice.
That was about a mile and a half's worth of walking down the tracks going, there's a body part. There's a body
A
part.
mile and a half.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because
Damn.
I mean, that train was doing about 60 miles an hour when it hit him. Because it was outside of town, so it was back up to full speed, about 60 when it hit him.
And it was like
So-
nighttime, so you probably can't see.
Yeah. He said he didn't, the conductor said he didn't see him until he was literally 5 foot away. And obviously nothing can be done at that point.
So this is how crazy ass Idaho is sometimes, and I love it because they basically, my theory about population control and about lawsuits and all that kind of stuff is we just take the warning labels off of everything and let
Right.
nature take its course. Well, here we have three kinds of train tracks. We have the train tracks that Chuck has seen his whole life, and I saw my whole life. You drive up to it, and a gate drops, and then a train goes
Mhm.
by, and then the gate raises, and then you drive past. There's a second kind. There is a sign and a stop sign, and you stop in front of the train tracks, make sure a train's not coming, and then you drive through.
Right.
And then there's the third kind, which is another sign that just tells you that train tracks are ahead, and
Yeah.
you can stop or not, but it's on you to figure out if a train is coming, and don't fuck up.
Right. Right.
Fuck. Okay.
So, yeah, no, I mean, and from where I grew up at, we kind of in town we had the arms, and just outside of town we had the arms. But there was a very good amount of train crossings that was just like that. There was a
Yeah.
sign that said, "Hey, train tracks," and it was on you to stop.
Yeah.
It was that simple. And
Right.
you'd be surprised how many people don't stop.
Well, and here's the thing: your guy was walking on the tracks, but just I mean, I don't know how we turn this into train safety, but trains will suck you in,
Mhm.
right? They will suck you in. And if you're too close to it when it passes by, that creation, that differentiation of high and low pressure, it's just like when when something heavy goes into the water and it pulls people towards it because it creates a vacuum and then pressure
Right.
and then trains will do that to you too. And if you get too close to it when it goes by at a good clip, they'll suck you right in, and you will not. Like, I have heard of people losing an arm to a train because they just happen to like only get their arm run over by it.
Mhm.
Right.
But it's like that's a, yeah. Anyway, trains are nothing to mess with. So this guy how long were you guys out there? Did you spend the whole night looking for body parts?
Yeah, we were out there for
Did you have to go
probably
back
a
out?
good 4 hours. We were out there for probably a good 4 hours. And what the messed up thing about it is such a small town. So I used to joke, and I still kind of joke about it. I have been in every person in that town's house.
Oh wow.
whether it be
Wow.
for friendly or for fire department or anything like that. Because I grew up there. I in a town of 264 people. It's not real hard to know everybody that lives in town.
Yeah, I have more friends on Facebook than that.
Yeah, right. So we're walking down the train tracks, and all we knew is we had body parts. We didn't know who it was or what it was. And I happened to walk by, and I looked down, and I seen a piece of flesh, and it had a tattoo, and I go, I know whose tattoo that is. And I made it about 3 more steps, and I recognized the shoes. I was like,
Oh shit.
yep, I know who
I
that is.
was totally that was going to be my next question when you said it was such a small town was did you identify him based on recognizing parts of the body?
Yeah, and the farther we got down, we finally found his wallet, and the sheriff's deputy picked up the wallet, and he looked at it, and I was like, "Is it such and such?" And he goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah." His dad is my next door neighbor, so
No shit.
have fun with that.
It must be tough working in a small town, knowing people and going on medicals or whatever, seeing them messed up or dead, and you know them personally, because I've seen it to where officers deal with it, someone who's passed and they actually know the person and it destroys them, because it hits so close to home. But this is your home and there's only a few hundred people there.
Well, so I can tell you, real quick, I was just going to add to that I can only imagine, and I want to hear what your experiences are like, because just moving here in LA, nobody knows anybody, right? In Southern California, nobody knows anybody. Like the Los Angeles Police Department where Dad worked, 10,000 cops. Like if you say, "Oh, my dad worked for LAPD," and somebody says, "Oh, so and so worked for LAPD," you can mention both their names, and there's less than 10% chance that they knew each other, right? They might, but
Right.
a lot of people. Whereas here, everybody's watching the news. They see the 4 college kids that got murdered in Idaho.
Mhm.
Well, Idaho is so small and such a tiny community that out of the 4, 2 of them went to the same high school as my son.
Oh.
And so it's like, it's just such a tiny community. And we're still a bigger, we're thousands of population, as I think the city I live in is 45 or 50,000, and you're talking about 246.
Yeah. I mean, so it's kind of funny. Kind of calling back to a locker room episode. My son has autism.
Okay.
So with that, through all the diagnosing of him getting autism or being diagnosed, we kind of found out that I am also on the spectrum. I share a lot of the same things that he did.
Right.
But with that being said, when it comes to the fire department, I was really good at disassociating the call from the person.
Right.
Whenever I got toned out, it was just the call. I never associated it with the person until much afterwards. And when I was in high school, a friend of ours committed suicide. It's a long story. Basically, it was a shoe-in football game. It was a Friday night. We knew we were going to kick the snot out of this team. We were getting ready for a bonfire. He committed suicide in the field that we were going to have the bonfire. I was one of the 10 that found him because we were loading trucks and taking truckloads of wood there. I took full responsibility of the scene. I was part of the people that helped call the cops. And then once the sheriff's department got there, I gave them the full breakdown and everything like that. Completely disassociated myself from being his friend. And I went straight into firefighter. Yeah. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse because I don't have a lot of trauma from some of the stuff that happened while I was on the department. And I seen some very horrific things. And one of the stories or the main story I'll tell tonight is going to be it's an absolute disaster of a scene. And it's just another day. It was just another day to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I get that. I get that because I was good at, for the most part, it's funny because some people have it naturally. Some people try to learn it and some people can never get it, but being able to compartmentalize, right? Being able to disassociate. It's still going to take a toll on you later, right?
Sure.
You're still going to have it's not like a magic, like, oh, I can just turn off my emotions and not take any of this stuff in. You take it in, it's like, okay, put that over there. I can't even look at it. Can't even deal with it. Like It's like bringing in the mail and setting it on the table and leaving it alone.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, so and when I started on the department, we had one chief, and then we moved over to another chief took over, who ended up becoming my dad. As a young kid growing up without a father figure in a
As in
small
he
town.
married your mom, or as in you just
No,
put him? Okay.
he just, I mean, he just kind of de facto became my dad, as in a way, because growing up in a small town, it's pretty easy to go down the bad path. And he
Mhm.
kind of pulled me back from that path. And through him, we took our department from 4 people, a 1976 Ford fire engine that we got from Lawrence, Kansas, and we turned it around. And now we've got like an '06 Freightliner. We've got a 1,500-gallon tanker. They just got an ambulance for medical response. I mean, he's completely turned that around. And yeah, I mean, kind of went from kind of a laughingstock fire department to a real legit fire department now. I mean, a
Nice.
1,500-gallon tanker is nothing to mess with.
Right.
That's
Well,
cool.
so the floor is yours, man. I know you've clearly told us a couple of them already, but like what are some of the things that a firefighter in a town of 246, besides you know Joe shit the rag man getting smacked by a train because he's
Right.
drunk.
So we'll get into the big story. I was 19 years old at the time when this story happened. Summer, it was a summer day. Part of our town, there's a 50,000-acre cattle ranch plus wildlife preserve. I worked on this ranch as a high school kid. This ranch has its own private road system and it's owned by 5 people. So we get toned out to a four-wheeler accident on said ranch. That's all
Ooh.
we were told.
Okay, I'm gonna go right now. My stomach is already in knots because four-wheel accidents, like off-road, dirt bike,
Yes.
quad. Okay, go ahead.
So because it was a summer day in the middle of, or in the middle of the week, most everybody was at work. I don't remember why I was home at that time. But anyways, I go down to the firehouse. I was very notorious for getting to the firehouse first. Uh, I had lots of lights and sirens on my little Ford Ranger, and I made sure I got there quick. I only had 2 other people show up. I had a female, and then a one of our other guys had just gotten back from, I want to say, Syria. He was in the National Guard. He was deployed, and he had just gotten back home. So I drive the fire engine out to the scene. I get out there. They tell me what gate to go in. I go in the gate. As soon as I get there, the person running the gate recognizes me, and the words out of her mouth were, "Thank God it's you." That's never a good sign when you pull up on scene and
Yeah.
they're saying that. I drive the 2 miles back to the scene. I pull up at an intersection, and it's all gravel roads. I pull up to an intersection, and it's before I can even get the engine in park. I've got parents screaming at me. The guy laying on the ground, or the kid laying on the ground, needs your attention. The one wearing the helmet still needs your attention. So me and the other male that I had with me, we jump off the engine. I don't even grab the medical bag or anything. We just take off running to this kid that is laying in the middle of the gravel road. We run up. We're standing beside each other. We look down. We turn and we look at each other. And it was pretty evident that he was DRT, dead right there.
Yep.
We could see that his rib or his chest was completely caved in, and through his shirt you could see his spine through the front.
Ooh. But like
The-
the ridges of it, or he like it was a compound fracture where the skin had ruptured, or
No, so what had happened was basically what happened was is he was on a sport four-wheeler. Everybody else was on a utility. So he took off flying and was so far ahead of everybody, he turned around and come back. Gravel roads, extremely dusty. One of the utility four-wheelers running about 50 miles an hour come up over his wheel and hit him dead center of the chest, and it broke his
crushed
whole
his chest.
entire rib cage and just shoved it down.
Ooh.
oh,
So as we got off the engine, there was one girl on the ground crying hysterical. She had a giant laceration to her forehead. Obviously, the female that we had on the engine instantly went there. Perfect.
right.
So we looked down at him. The other guy that was with me, just to kind of save face, reached down, checked for a pulse. We obviously knew it wasn't there. So he literally just laid his coat over the top of him and took off walking to one of the other patients. So at this point in time, I kind of stood there for a second and just looked around to see what I had going on because I hadn't even surveyed the scene yet.
Right.
I
You're
had-
triaging. You got to like, who can I
Yeah.
actually help? Yeah.
So the one girl was being taken care of. The other guy went to another guy that was laying on, or he was sitting on the ground and had his hand over his collarbone, but you could see the collarbone was broke because his hand was raised up. So he went to start working with him. So I'm looking around. I've got two other guys sitting on the ground. One is shivering and it's like 90 degrees outside. He's in shock.
I'm in shock. Yeah.
One of the other guys is just sitting there, just being absolutely quiet. And then I see movement out of the corner of my eye and I turn and I look. And there's a guy just wandering around in the road, just walking in circles, and looks like he just got into a boxing match because the lights are on, but there isn't anything going on inside there.
Major head trauma, huh?
Yeah.
I was like, I should probably go look at that guy. Let's go see what that guy's up to. And
ALOC, right?
Yeah. And as I started getting close to him, I could see yellow fluid leaking out of his ears.
Uh-oh.
I'm like, this guy is in bad shape.
Yeah,
I go
I mean,
up
I would
to
rather
him.
see blood leaking from his ears.
Yes.
Than
Yeah, not
brain fluid.
Yeah,
cerebral
cerebral
spinal fluid.
cerebral.
Yeah.
There we go.
So I go
Fluid.
walking up to him and I'm like, hello, my name's Dakota. I'm with the fire department. He swings at me, which is very common in head trauma. So I kind of take a step back. Well, one of the ladies that was screaming at us as soon as we got off the engine was his mom.
Oh.
She come running up and he recognized her and he just kind of walked towards her. I was like, hey, I can work with this. I am outnumbered by patients. Like, congratulations, mom, you're helping.
Mhm.
I got him sat down on the ground, found out he was riding on the same four-wheeler that the kid that died was on.
Oh,
I was like, that explains the massive amount of trauma. So I gave mom a 15-second crash course in how to hold C-spine. She held C-spine and talked to her son, and I moved on to the next kid. I moved on to the guy that was in shock. I took a blanket, wrapped it over him. He was coherent and talking. He was just not processing what all was going on.
right.
And this whole time I'm in contact with dispatch. Now I'm scene commander at this point. Dispatch has me.
Right. That's crazy to me. You're scene commander, right?
Oh,
That's
no,
wild.
crazy hasn't happened yet.
Oh, all right.
So I get a hold of dispatch and I tell them I need at least 3 ambulances. Well, our county is so tiny, we only have 2 at the hospital. So they get a hold of somebody out of the county in Kansas to send over an ambulance. That's fine. We were right on the Kansas state line. No big deal. Then dispatch asked me if I'm going to need live flight. I told her yes. So as if I could not call in dispatch, or I could not call in live flight. Dispatch technically couldn't, but they could get our ambulance crew to call in live flight. So I get on the radio with our ambulance guys. Granted, super small community, so I knew the ambulance guys. They asked me what I had. I told them what I had. We started 2 helicopters out of Kansas City. So,
wow.
At the same point in time,
and how far are you from Kansas City?
About 60 miles. So it takes
all right.
Yeah,
so it's not close.
15 minutes because I can cut through everything else. So both of my ambulances show up from our county. They show up, and then I get a call from the first helicopter. He's 5 minutes out.
Okay.
So I have to set up an LZ. I'm in command of the scene, the ambulance drivers, and I'm now setting up an LZ.
Wow.
I get an LZ set up in the field. I get the first helicopter on the ground. As soon as the first helicopter hits the ground, the second helicopter gets a hold of me and says, we are 2 minutes out. So I have to go on the other side of the street or other side of the gravel road, cover everybody up with blankets because I have to land them almost on the road and land the second helicopter. So I get the second helicopter on the ground. Then we're starting to figure out who's taking what patient and where they're going. obviously the kid leaking spinal fluid, he is priority number one. He's going to a major trauma center. We got him loaded up and taken away. Then then at that point in time, the Kansas ambulance shows up.
Okay.
Kansas ambulance crews work differently than Missouri ambulance crews. In Kansas, when they show up on scene, they take control of the scene. So I have
because
this lady.
that's just their protocol, or
Yes, that's just
Okay.
their protocol.
Interesting.
okay. So it's not like codified
That's
in
weird.
law where like
No.
you can't. Okay.
So I have this lady, she gets out of the ambulance and she starts barking orders at me. I was professional and I was like, hold on, I have control of the scene. This is what I've got going on right now. She starts telling me what me and my ambulance crews are going to start doing. This is where being in a small community is nice, because one of my ambulance crew members went, no, and he took her behind their ambulance and they started getting into a screaming match. I'm like, guys, this is fine. We need to load patients. We've got patients here. We've got broken collarbones. We've got head trauma. We've got all of this that we need to get sorted out. So, end all be all, we had 2 go life flight. Turns out the kid that had the broken collarbone, it also appeared that he had a broken neck, because I had his mom holding C-spine too. And when they went to transfer him over to the gurney and she let go, his neck kind of flopped over and he couldn't really control it. So he was just going to go ambulance, but broken neck and broken collarbone got him an airplane ride or a helicopter ride. Got everybody loaded up in ambulances. Besides the one kid, everybody survived. So when it goes back to, I worked on this ranch and the 5 owners.
Right.
Every one of these owners knew me. I knew every one of these kids. I'd known these kids for probably 4 years. So it was very very odd walking up to a mass scene like that and going, I know everybody here. And I know that kid that's dead right there. Like, it was very
surreal.
Yeah, very surreal. But that was the craziest scene I ever had to deal with. Landing life flight was one of my favorite jobs. I absolutely love landing life flight.
But you know, it's interesting because you're talking about being in such a small agency in such a small area, and yet I know veteran firefighters on large departments that have never had to handle a scene and control a scene and land helicopters and call mutual aid in from other, you know what I mean? It's
right.
It's interesting. And I this was pointed out to me by my father when I got on the job, because he was from a much larger department and I went to a much smaller department. But when you work for a big agency, everybody's a specialist, right? Like, oh, you have a traffic collision, we have a traffic collision unit. Oh, you have a traffic collision that involves DUI and children. Well, we have a traffic collision unit that does DUIs involving children. Oh, you have a homicide. Well, we have that. Oh, you have a cold case. You know what I mean? There's a specialist for everything, and that's all they do. But when you go to a smaller agency, you're it. Like you know, they don't call in specialists. You are doing the job. So for those of you out there who are actually like looking to get on an apartment and you look at these bigger agencies, just remember that they have a lot of cool shit, but sometimes the smaller agencies are going to let you do more.
Oh yeah. And I mean, like I said, so I was primary driver for all the equipment. I could drive all the equipment. So there was a lot of times that we would get towed out to a house fire. I would drive the engine to the scene, then go put on my SCBA and go inside the house to fight the fire. And somebody else would run the engine outside.
Right.
And it was, I mean, I did take my fire 1 and 2 certifications. I took that class. As volunteer firefighters in Missouri, we weren't allowed to be EMTs or paramedics. We couldn't have that title as a volunteer, so we could only do like basic, stop bleeding, hold C-spine, that kind of thing.
First aid.
Yeah, right? Kind of, general first aid, but I could do all of that stuff. So I mean, if my
What's
advice
the
for any-
reasoning behind not letting? Sorry, I go ahead with your advice. I just was curious what the reasoning was for that.
so the reasoning behind that was, as a volunteer firefighter, we could fall under the Good Samaritan law,
Uh-huh.
where so they didn't have to carry the insurance and everything for
Got
us
it.
to be like
Okay.
EMTs and stuff like
Okay.
that.
Makes sense.
Um,
Fucking
but yeah, my
liability every time.
advice is definitely go to a smaller department. Even if you get on like a big department, volunteer at a small department. One of the neighboring volunteer departments, almost their whole department was firefighters in Kansas City, but they all
Right.
lived in this town, so they would volunteer on the side. And which is super great for somebody like me, because we were always calling them out for mutual aid, fires and stuff like that. And then I can see how the guys that do it professionally, they would teach you stuff. They would, work with you and show you, hey, this is what to do, this is what not to do. And so it was super nice. But definitely play around on a small department, because it is a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, until you happen to come upon an accident with people and
Right.
but
And-
here's the thing, that can happen anywhere, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's the odds go up.
I've seen it happen.
But yeah, I
But-
mean, I had a relative who had a friend that followed an ambulance just to see where it was going, and it went to her parents' house.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oh.
Talk about picking the wrong day to see where the ambulance is going.
Right.
I've seen it to where I work on a big agency, and I've seen it to where we were working on a kid. He did autoerotica. He
Mm.
choked himself to death, or strangled
His
himself to
chicken
death.
and himself.
And so we rolled up on the scene, and dad's working on him, and there was 2 units that went, myself and another unit, two-man unit. So we have 4 officers there, and everyone's frantic. We go running up into this place. My buddy's like, I think I know this place. I was like, oh, really? Well, let's keep going. And we go up there, and we have our CPR kits. And so we run up, and we see dad working on this kid. And we're like, all right, hey, back up. Like, hey, let us get some work. Give us some air. Let us work. And we start working on this kid. And I look over at my buddy, and he just goes cold face. And I'm like, hey, dude, what's wrong? He's like, I know this kid, family friend. And I'm like, oh, fuck, step back. And so I start running it. And so I start running the scene. And even though I was the third officer there with the most seniority, and there was only one other person underneath me that didn't have as much seniority as me, so I was like almost bottom of the barrel. The other 2 people, the dude who had the most seniority, he knew the kid, so he couldn't make decisions. I had to tell him what to do. The other one, he only had a year more than me, and so I would just run him because I had more experience than him in patrol and shit like that. So I'm running the fucking scene with what, 3.5 years on the job, and I'm like, this is wild. And I'm telling him what to do. We're starting breathing. We're starting, chest compressions and shit like that. Because even though I'm like, hey, stop working, I go to feel his pulse, to feel a ligature mark. And I'm like, dude, this kid's been dead for a minute. But we have the family watch. So we have to keep working. And I have to keep telling the guy who knows the kid, because it's a family friend of his, what to do and keep going to keep his mind off of it. And then when everything's said and done, rescue ambulance gets there, they check it. Like, no, they work on him a little bit, call it. And then, we do all the rest of the death investigation and shit like that. But I worked on a big agency, and so the chances of running into someone that is very slim. And I've only ran into one other person that I went to high school with, and he was a drug addict and trying to sell dope. And we tried to arrest him and do shit like that, and then we ran him off. But it's so rare that you run into someone that that's dead or severely injured or whatever. And it's like a 1 in 1,000 chance or 1 in a million chance of it fucking happened. But it also, for people who live in that general area and then they go work that area, it's more common for them, even though there is like 400,000, 500,000 people in that small little city or whatever, or even more in that little town. It's still like, sometimes it happens, and you're talking about agency that's fucking massive. And I was like, Jesus, this is wild. And I've only ran into that twice. And I don't believe I've ever had to work on someone that I actually maybe knew while working in that area and knew who that person was, but not personally knew from outside of work. And I think that's so wild. And I see people who lock up on it, and I'm like, that must be difficult. I mean, I can compartmentalize pretty fucking well. And then think about it later, but I'm like, that's so fucking wild. Like, if you know everyone and you're going to most calls and you're seeing people that are fucking severely screwed up on the ground, and you personally know them, you've had conversations, you've had friendships with them, and you're seeing them at their worst, like how difficult that must be, and how tough that must be to try to remain in that zone to where you're having to take work first and then personal shit later and completely shut that switch off.
Well, and I would run into people, in a smaller agency. You'll deal with people on a professional basis. Like Chuck at a larger agency, he's working the same areas and stuff, but he's going to have less frequent flyers, say, than somebody like me. And then I'll have less frequent flyers than somebody than, say, like Dakota, because Dakota's dealing with literally the same people all the time. And I was dealing with a lot of the same people all the time. So you get to see these faces and stuff like that. And sometimes, you get to know somebody in town, and then the next thing you know, you're arresting them, or you've arrested them, and the next thing you know, they're hit by a car, or that you're on a call performing CPR on them, and then 6 months later you run into them and they lived, and you're like, oh shit,
Right.
you lived, right? It's that kind of when you know people and you deal, I guess
It's like I saved some dude's life, never saw him again.
yeah,
I don't even know what happened.
No idea.
You save someone, and then 6 months later, you see that person alive.
Yeah, so we went to a call, and I think I've kind of talked about this a little bit on the show, but we went to a call where was a teenage male had hung himself, and we were pretty much convinced we were going to a dead body call, but they said CPR was in progress or whatever, so we went out there. Well, Dad's working on him. We start working on him. Fire gets there. They were working on him. He's agonal breathing, all the bad stuff. And even the medic there happened to be the wife of one of our officers at our department. So he worked for the police department. She worked on the ambulance crew, but he wasn't at the call. She was. And she's telling us, yeah, he's circling the drain, but he still technically had a pulse. So they shipped him off to the hospital. But like, lo and behold, 6 months later, I'm like working patrol and going to a call at a park of a disturbance of a bunch of people, being too loud and whatever. And I get there, and there's a bunch of teenagers that are, talking loud and being rambunctious. And one of them is this kid. And, I got to talk to him after the fact, and I was like, hey, and he's like, oh, hey, man. I'm like, so, I was there when you had your incident. And he's like, oh, cool. And like, he still kind of had a little mark around his neck. And like, he was like, no, I'm good. Like, it was the most, like you said, surreal, when you go through, and then the next thing you know, like, beep, 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 beep. Hey, how's it going? Bebopping around. And you're like, oh shit. I think it's kind of like when you see somebody, like, you remember when you were a kid and you'd have like a high school teacher or an elementary school teacher or whatever, and you only saw them at school. And then one day out of nowhere, you run into them at like the grocery store in their civilian clothes with their like wife and kids. And you're like, oh my God, you're a real person. And you're wearing flip-flops and shorts, it was this weird disconnect. Imagine that times 100, because you're like, oh, I'm fucking doing CPR on you, and I thought you were dead. And here you are.
What's funny is that so I haven't had anyone that I really knew that from my personal life before I became law enforcement that died on me, but I did go to school with a lot of fucking weirdos. And so John used to work in an area
Our John, right?
near, close near to where I worked, but it was still pretty far away, to where if you had overlapping people, you'd be like, oh, that's just so fucking weird, it's strange. So I hit him up, and I was like, hey dude, like, remember Kyle from high school? And he was like, oh, that curly haired fucking weirdo kid. And I was like, yeah, that kid. I was like, I ran into him on a call because they called in someone selling drugs at a bus stop, some transient selling fucking drugs, and come to find out that was him. And we couldn't find anything on him. There was no witnesses or anything like that wanted to stick around. So we ended up just, taking a strong FI and dusting him off and getting him out of out of our area. And he's like, oh yeah. He goes, funny thing, I just arrested him. And I was like, no shit. He goes, yeah. He goes, want to see the booking photo?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no fucking way. I was like, yeah, let me see if the same person. Sure as shit, same kid wearing the same fucking clothes.
Wow.
So it's just, and that was months and months apart, and I was like, that's fucking weird, like it's wild, that the weird things that we run into in this the weird coincidence, even in really big areas, this how small the world is, but so vast it is, but it's just weird things overlap and you see people and it's so strange.
Yeah. And that's I think what I it sounds like what you were talking about, Dakota, with the compartmentalizing. What I was talking about with that is like that doesn't go away. Like you're gonna have to process the fact that you knew this person, or
Right.
you had we've talked to people. What was the firefighter we talked to where the house that was on fire was, he thought it was his grandparents' house at first, and it was because everybody in the town was so close to each other, and he knew the guy that lived there and died, and all this other like
Yeah, it's wild
stuff. You can't. This job's hard enough, and then you add in personal relationships.
oh
See, and like one thing that I found that it almost really helped was, somebody's in a car accident, somebody's house is on fire, something like that. That is one of the worst days of their life.
yeah
And then, I'm in a small community. I walk up and they know me. It's an kind of an instant comfort
calming
because,
yeah
and they know that I know what I'm doing. I'm
Right.
trained. And I'll admit I was kind of a dorky kid in high school. I mean, my graduating class was 18. We were very tiny, very close knit, but I was kind of, I was kind of the dorky kid in high school and stuff like that. But when I was on call, when I was a firefighter, I was a
Different
completely
person.
different. Yeah, I
Because
was.
you had to be a different person.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was. I'm kind of the person that I am now. The fire department definitely helped me gain self confidence. I was strong. I was commanding. It worked out. Being a friendly face for people to see because car accident, they're freaking out. Their parents are freaking out. I can walk in and be like, hey, I got this. I got this.
Right.
Let me
Right.
handle this. And everybody would kind of take a step back and go, okay, we know you, we've grown up with you. We know
Right.
that you can handle this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, to speak on that, to speak on the whole, like when you're a different type of person when you're actually working. It's the weird. I'm a big time introvert, whatever. And when I work, I'm exactly the opposite. Like I'll go up to anyone, I'll talk to anyone. Like I have to. It's just I'm a completely different person. It's almost like two
Well,
different
look at the
personalities.
podcast. You're not an introvert on this podcast,
Yeah, I mean that's a little bit different. I
right?
mean, I'm
No,
gotten
but what I'm
better.
saying
I've
is
very
that
much gotten better, but
you get better at things, but you put on that uniform, or you
right.
you put on your podcast microphone or whatever. My wife would laugh. She would not be able to figure it out at first. She comes up to visit me at the department and like, hey, let's go to lunch. I was like, all right, drive up. We'll go get some Code 7 or whatever. And I would always walk out in uniform, and it never failed. Every time my wife would come up and see me in uniform, she would always comment on how different I was. Like she said, you look taller. You look like, and I'm like, I'm not. She goes, but you look,
The
how
black
do you
uniform.
look so much taller? And I said, well, first of all, I slouched in my normal life, but when I put on my super suit, you can't slouch.
Right.
Like you have to like fucking
You have to be
it's
a pillar of the
ingrained in you.
community.
Stand up straight. Like
Yeah.
you put on that uniform and it gives you license to become a different person. It's the same reason that people put on costumes every year at Halloween, and it gives them permission to act a fool and do shit that they would never ever do.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a rise in all these, I'm a slutty doctor.
Right.
I
Now
always loved working Halloween.
Yeah.
I will
Or the
kind of
weeks
go
leading
back.
up to it.
Right. I will kind of go back
Maybe
to one
too
of the
soon.
drawbacks of being on a very small department. So after we did after me and one other person on my department did the fire 1 and 2, all the departments around us decided to have a fire games. We kind of wanted to show the community, how well we're trained, everything like that. It was just a fun, day. Except it was 98 degrees and we're running around in full gear, and fire gear is very
Mhm.
hot. But it was kind of a point of pride for us because I could go from street clothes to full breathing SCBA in a minute 30.
Right.
I was very good at putting on my gear.
You're
Okay,
practiced at
Clark
it.
Kent.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
So we do all these fire games. Cool. Everything's great. We are on our way home from the neighboring town and we get toned out to a structure fire. Now we'd been doing these fire games for about 2.5 hours in the blazing heat, and then we get toned out to a structure fire. I go inside and interior fight this, and every firefighter knows the general rule of thumb is you get 2 bottles and then you're done. I was in the process of going in on my 3rd bottle, and I walked up to my chief and I was like, Chief, I don't feel so good. And he goes, maybe you should back out and go see the ambulance. So as I'm walking out, his wife at the time had also done EMT training, and she
Mhm.
was going in on her 3rd bottle. And you know, kind of going back to when I was a firefighter, I was completely different. When she seen me walking out, stripping off my gear, she realized there was a problem. So the first thing she did is she walked up to me. She goes, "What's going on?" I'm like, "I don't feel very good." She rips off my gloves and checks my pulse, and her eyes got about as big around as dinner plates. And she just pointed at the ambulance and go, "You need to go over there." So I go over to the ambulance, and one of the guys on the ambulance, his name was Bob. He was from New York, and he was just this mountain of a man, just an absolute monster of a man. I go up to him and I was like, "Hey, I don't feel so good." He checks my pulse and he goes, "You get in the ambulance right now so I can start an IV bag on you because
Oh.
he goes, "You're not even sweating anymore." I was like,
Oh,
"I'm
wow.
fine." And he reaches down and picks me up. And I was 200 pounds at the time. He picks me up and walks me into the ambulance like I was a little child and sat me down on the bench. And I just sat there like a good boy and got my IV bag.
Mm.
Oh man.
But
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the drawbacks of being on the department is, I mean, we'll do. I've been on grass fires for 8-10 hours before at a stretch too. You know,
Mhm.
it is just absolutely exhausting and just,
Brutal.
but it's, we do
Yep.
it for the fun
We
of it.
do it. Yeah. For the in quotations.
Right.
The fun of it. Anyway, it is fun. Don't get like we
Oh, yeah.
wouldn't do it if it wasn't fucking a blast. But there's a lot like for every 10 seconds of like awesome pursuit, fight, fire, helicopter, you're gonna deal with hours of paperwork and emotional trauma and sleepless nights. It's a trade-off, but let me tell you, that's how awesome those exciting moments are if we're willing to put up with all the other hours and hours and hours of bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
But eventually the bullshit catches up to you.
So
That's for sure.
this was one of the other stories I was going to tell. We get toned out 3:00, 3:30 in the morning. There's only a certain amount of people that are out at 3:30 in the morning. And in a small community, the bars are shutting down at 3. So we get toned out to a car accident at 3:30 in the morning. We'll grab the engine, show up. I have a vehicle on its top, and I can see an arm sticking, like elbow sticking out of the passenger window
Hmm.
down in the ditch. My fire chief, his wife at the time, and myself are the ones on the scene. She goes down in there. She starts talking to him. He's talking to us. He's just coherent and everything's fine. I follow her down in there and we're talking, trying to figure it out. His arm is basically from the elbow completely underneath the roof of this car. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do it. He's in a very deep ditch. It was probably 7-8 foot deep.
Ooh.
So
Yeah,
we're talking to him.
that's the freaking canal.
Yeah. So we're talking to him, trying to figure it out. My fire chief's up on the road and he's starting to we just got a bunch of brand new extrication gear. We got a grant. We got new extrication gear. We wanted to play with the fun stuff, but we decided just to use the airbags so we could lift the car up off of him to get his arm out. Well, we're standing there, and the sheriff's deputy, who is kind of standing up on the road, he goes, "Hey, you guys need to watch above your head." What do you mean? And me and the lady, we turn and we look up. The front bumper to the car is hanging off of the power lines.
Hmm.
And we were like, "Oh, okay." So we put on our helmets and we went back to doing what we were doing. We got him out of the car, and there's beer cans on the ground, inside the car, everything. And she asked him, she goes, "Have you been drinking?" Because he was bleeding. So we were, trying to figure out how much blood we're going to deal with. And he looks at us dead in the face and goes, "I haven't been drinking."
Mm.
And I
Okay.
reached down and I grabbed one of the beer cans and it was still cold. I was like, you understand that we're not the cops. We just need to know so we can help you not bleed to death. He
Right.
goes, "Okay, maybe I've had a couple." I'm like,
Right.
and I'm sure you guys dealt with that way more as cops. We're like, "No, I haven't been drinking."
Oh,
Come
I
on.
dealt with an ambulance. I dealt with an ambulance crew member trying to get my DUI crash suspect on an ambulance before I could smell the alcohol in his breath because they thought they were protecting him.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, and I looked, I'm like, we're just going to go up to the hospital and get what we need there, right? Like, you're not
Yeah.
just
Every time they say I haven't been drinking, they're like 2 times, 3 times over the legal limit, and you're like,
Oh,
yeah.
So what happened was is this guy had so he basically crashed just on the other side of a curve. It was a full probably 2 mile straightaway stretch. He was so drunk he passed out, flat-footed the car, and when he missed the curve and ran off the road, he hit the driveway to a field and basically did his best impression of the Dukes of Hazzard and launched the car about 60 foot and it landed, bounced, and rolled on top of him.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was absolutely amazing. So we get done with the call, everything's wrapped up. I go home and I go to bed. I wake up the next morning about 9 o'clock to a phone call from my chief, and he goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "I'm fine." He was like, "Are you itching anywhere?" And at that point in time, I realized I was scratching my chest, and I just went, "Oh no!"
mm.
And I looked down, and I am covered from about mid chest to just above the knee in poison ivy. So he had landed.
Oh,
Yes, he had landed in a poison ivy patch, and we were down there in the summer heat, sweaty, trying to get him out of it. And going back to for the fun, I ended up going to the hospital, getting steroid shots, being on a Z pack so I could get over this poison ivy. Yeah,
mm.
for the fun.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, we appreciate you coming on
Wow.
again, Dakota. I'm glad it was war stories this time, and we finally were able to schedule you and get your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
So, Chuck, what do you have for us as we close up? I know you have our dedication this week, right?
I do. Yeah. I'll do a dedication. I'll get into all the nitty gritty stuff. So this week's dedication goes out to Dylan Michael Vakoff. Police officer Dylan Vakoff was shot and killed while responding to a domestic disturbance in the 6700 block of West 51st Avenue at about 1:40 a.m. He and another officer were attempting to break up a fight between family members when one of the involved men opened fire, wounding a woman who was also involved in the disturbance. The subject then exchanged shots with Officer Vakoff and the other officer. Officer Vakoff was mortally wounded before the subject was also shot. Officer Vakoff was transported to Lutheran Hospital, where he succumbed to his wounds. Officer Vakoff was a U.S. Air Force veteran and had served with the Arvada Police Department for 3 years. He was 27 years old. They had a tour of 3 years. And he's a United States military veteran.
Well, rest easy, brother. We got it from here. We appreciate you coming on, Dakota. You have any last things you want to say to our audience before we close out?
Yeah, if you've got a volunteer fire department or you can volunteer or help out with fire department police agencies, do it. It is a lot of fun, and you would be surprised it might turn into a career field. Which I, as a firefighter, I gave all my sheriff's deputies and crap, and they gave it to me right back. But at the end of the day, we are brotherhood.
Yep.
We're together in this, and if you can go volunteer or if you can go help out, go do it. It is a lot of fun, and they will greatly appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as usual, you guys can support us by going to our website, and we still have the hoodies and the shirts and the all that stuff available. Chuck, how can they follow us?
Yeah, go to our Instagram at war_stories_official and our Facebook at War Stories Podcast. If you already follow us, share our post and our info. You can also go to the link in our bio on Instagram and Facebook to reach all of our socials, our media, and our website. Our podcast is on all major podcast streaming platforms, as well as on YouTube. If you want to go support us, the website is www.warstoriesofficial.com. Go ahead and grab some gear. We got the new shirts, got some stickers. They can only be obtained by purchase of the shirt. We still have some Whoopie hoodies, and we have some of the other old shirts still there.
Mhm.
And if you want to be featured on the show, please go to booking.warstories@gmail.com and send me your story. I'll get you booked. We are looking for law enforcement, corrections, dispatchers, fire, medics, and veterans. If you have a friend who you think would be a great fit, let them know about us and give them our booking email. Again, thank you for the support. Stay safe.
Yep. And we appreciate you guys all listening. We're going to have our debriefs, I think, are going well. If you guys have stuff you want us to debrief, let us know.
Did you hear about that? This might be a possible topic, but did you hear about that? That I think it was a deputy from like Virginia or some shit who catfished a girl out in Riverside and then went out there and then ended up killing
her or killing her family.
Setting house
yeah,
on fire, some crazy shit.
Crazy.
I don't know. This story's still coming out, but I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But that's just wild.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
So, yeah, dude. Anyway, well, we will get into those. If you have topics, you can send it to us. You can always, if you want to be on booking.warstories@gmail.com. If you just have a comment or want to send us an email to read, it's mailbag.warstories@gmail.com. And until our next episode, come home with your shield or honor.